35 and still single, my sister said, lifting her voice over the Christmas music. Wow, that must get lonely. The whole table laughed. Dad nearly choked on his drink. Mom raised her glass, smiled at me like I was the problem, and said, "She's just joking." I set my drink down. "Don't worry about me," I said. "I've been married for 6 years." Mom froze mid-toast. My sister's fork hit her plate. They thought I'd come home to reveal a husband. I hadn't. I'd come because Dad was selling the family business, and buried in the deal was a signature that looked exactly like mine. I had not been back to Columbus in 2 years. The drive from the airport took me past frozen lawns, glowing porches, and the grocery store where Mom used to buy sheet cakes with too much frosting. Snow pressed against the curbs by the time I turned onto my parents' street. The sky had gone dark, and every house looked warm enough to belong to someone else. Mom opened the door before I could knock. The smell hit me first. Pine cleaner, roasted ham, cinnamon from the pie near the stove. For 1 second, I was 12 again, carrying a school project through that doorway and hoping somebody would ask how I made it. Nobody did. I'm an acoustic engineer. I design spaces so voices carry clearly without getting swallowed by noise. Lecture halls, studios, hospital rooms, places where one sentence matters. Maybe that is why I notice silence the way other people notice weather. In my family, silence had rules. Dad, Robert, filled every room. He ran the manufacturing business my grandfather started and spoke about the Parker name like it was a flag planted in every sacrifice we were supposed to make. Mom, Susan, kept the peace by sanding down anything sharp. If Emily insulted me, Mom called it teasing. If Dad dismissed me, she called him stressed. If I objected, she told me not to make things harder. Emily learned early that cruelty had no consequences as long as she smiled afterward. I learned the opposite lesson. I learned to leave quietly. That was how I built a life in Chicago nobody at that table truly knew. A career they described as making rooms less echoey. A marriage they had never been invited into. Michael and I had been married for 6 years. We had a small ceremony, no announcement, and no performance. I kept my last name. He never asked me to change it. I did not hide him because I was ashamed. I hid him because my family had a way of turning everything I loved into either a joke or a resource. And they had already done it once, 11 years earlier. When I was 24, the family business was close to folding. I had developed a layered acoustic panel on my own, then used a corner of Dad's workshop to build the first prototype. It worked. Orders came in. The company survived. At first, Dad called it my design, then it became our design. Eventually, it became his vision. But inside the wooden frame, where no customer would look, I had carved 2 letters, SP. A week before Christmas, a technician called me and said Dad was about to sell that design in a $20 million deal. He also said my name was on the paperwork. The problem was, I had never signed it. For 3 seconds after I said I was married. Nobody moved. Mom's glass stayed suspended near her mouth. Emily stared at me as if I had changed shape in front of her. Dad leaned back slowly, studying me with the careful expression he used when a number on a balance sheet refused to make sense. Then the questions came. What's his name? How long has this been going on? Why didn't you tell us? Not one person asked whether I was happy. His name is Michael, I said. And yes, it's real. Emily gave a short laugh. So, where is he? Too embarrassed to meet us, I looked at her. He's working. That was all I gave them. Dad said nothing else, but his eyes stayed on me through dessert. He was no longer looking at the daughter he liked to dismiss. He was trying to calculate what I knew. The next morning, I drove to the family business. Fresh snow squeaked under my boots. The lobby smelled like new carpet and burnt coffee. A brass plaque near the entrance carried Dad's name in letters large enough to catch the light. Across from it hung the first acoustic panel I had ever built. My panel. The display card called it the breakthrough that secured Robert Parker's vision. My name was nowhere. Voices drifted from the glass conference room. Dad was walking a group of buyers through the deal. Everything is clean, he said. Every design, every right, all properly assigned to the company. Clean. The word made my stomach tighten. I waited until the visitors moved toward the production floor, then asked Emily where the ownership records were being kept. Her smile sharpened. Why would you need those? I designed the original system. You helped, she said, a long time ago. Two employees glanced over. Emily lowered her voice just enough to make it crueler. You leave for years, show up with a secret husband, and suddenly you care about the business. People might think you're jealous. Mom appeared carrying a tray of cookies for the guests. She's just joking, she said. This time. The words did not disappear the insult. They revealed the method. I walked away before my face gave them anything. Tom found me near the loading dock, his breath fogged in the cold. Come with me, he said. He led me to a small office where the due diligence papers had been arranged for review. He stayed by the door while I turned through the ownership records. Then I saw it. A transfer agreement bearing my name. The signature looked close, almost convincing, but the first curve was too round. The final stroke crossed the wrong way. Whoever signed it had practiced being me. I checked the date. 5 years earlier. On that exact day. I had been in Rotterdam presenting at a conference. I still had the photos, the travel payments, the program, and the passport stamp. I was thousands of miles away. This was not careless paperwork. Someone in my family had planned it. I waited until the building emptied. The lobby lights had dimmed, leaving the first panel under a single white spotlight. From the front, it belonged to Dad. His name was on the card. His story was printed beneath it. I lifted the frame from the wall and turned it over. There it was. SP. The letters were faint, scratched into the wood by my 24-year-old hand. I ran my thumb over them and felt something inside me crack, not loudly, but completely. I had spent 11 years telling myself that letting Dad take the credit was love. Standing there, I finally understood it had only taught him that taking from me was free. That evening, I helped Mom clean the kitchen. She washed. I dried. I don't remember signing anything over, I said. Her hand slowed in the water. Oh, honey, your father handled all that. He said you were too busy to worry about paperwork. She smiled like she had just described a kindness. My chest went cold. You knew Mom looked down at the sink. I knew he took care of it. That was her answer. I found Dad in his study with a glass of bourbon and an old ledger open across his knees. I saw the agreement, I said. That isn't my signature. He did not flinch. You built it in a Parker workshop, he said. The design belonged here. I created it before I ever brought it into that building. He waved that away. Then he told me his father had taken credit for his first design. 2. I hated him for it, Dad said, until I understood. That is how a family survives. He said it like pain became honorable if you passed it down. When I told him I would not confirm the transfer, his face hardened. Then remember what happens next. Employees lose jobs. Your mother loses security. The deal dies because of you, for one terrible second. I believed him. The next morning, they gathered me at the dining table and placed a fresh agreement beside my coffee. One real signature could make the fake one disappear. Mom cried. Emily whispered, "Please don't destroy us." I picked up the papers, but I did not sign them. I called Rachel, an intellectual property attorney I trusted. She confirmed what I already suspected. I still owned the design. Then I told Michael everything. He did not offer money or influence. He asked one question. What do you want for the first time? I answered without thinking about what my family needed. I want the truth on the record and on closing day. I planned to put it there, even if every person I still loved chose the lie instead. By the next afternoon, Emily knew who Michael was. She found me in the guest room, holding her phone like she had uncovered treasure. Your husband works in investment. I looked up. Yes, her entire face changed. The sister who had laughed at me over Christmas dinner suddenly sat beside me and touched my arm. Stella, why didn't you tell us this could fix everything? That sentence told me all I needed to know. Within an hour, Dad opened the good bourbon. Mom called me sweetheart 3 times. Emily praised my career, though 2 days earlier she had reduced it to making rooms quiet. Then they made the request, call Michael, ask him to influence the buyers, ask him to bring in money, ask him to make the ownership problem disappear. Dad spread his hands across the table. You have access to people who can save this family. No, I said. I have a husband. He is not a tool. Dad's jaw tightened. You would let $20 million disappear over pride. It is not pride. It is my name. That night, I sat at the desk in the guest room and wrote a statement. No accusations, no dramatic language, just facts. I created the design. I never transferred it. The signature in the records was not mine. I would not approve it now. Then I signed the bottom with my real signature. Before sunrise, Mom came into my room wearing her robe. She sat on the bed and took my hand. You have always been the strong one, she whispered. Emily falls apart. Your father cannot handle humiliation. But you can carry this. Her fingers felt warm around mine. For years, I had mistaken those words for love. Now I heard what they meant. You can survive what we do to you, so we do not have to stop. I am not carrying it this time, I said. At 10 that morning, I entered the glass conference room. The heating vents hummed overhead. Legal pads sat beside untouched coffee. Outside, snow covered the parking lot in a white sheet. Dad sat at the head of the table. Mom sat against the wall. Emily stood near the door with her phone. The buyer's attorney reviewed the papers, then looked up. We need the inventor to confirm the chain of ownership before we proceed. Every face turned toward me. Dad smiled and slid the agreement across the glass. A silver pen rested on top. Just confirm what you agreed to years ago, he said. Then we can all move forward. I picked up the pen. Mom closed her eyes. Emily exhaled. Dad leaned back, certain he had won. The metal felt cold against my fingers, just like the glass I had held at Christmas dinner. I set the pen down. The click echoed through the room. I cannot confirm something that never happened. The attorney straightened. Dad's smile vanished. I placed my statement on the table. The signature in your records is not mine. On the date shown there, I was in Rotterdam. I have the conference schedule, travel payments, photographs, and passport record. I developed the design independently, and I never transferred ownership. Silence filled the room. Emily reached me first. Call Michael, she whispered. Please, he can still fix this. No, Dad forced a laugh. This is a private family misunderstanding. It stopped being private when you used my name in a business deal. Mom stood. Stella, think about the employees. I turned to the buyers. I am willing to discuss a lawful licensing agreement. The company can continue production. Employees who had nothing to do with this should be protected, but the records must be corrected. My authorship recognized, and the license negotiated honestly. The attorney nodded once and pulled the agreement away from Dad. That movement broke him. Dad rose so fast his chair struck the wall. The Parker name comes first. His voice cracked across the glass. I stayed seated. No, Dad, the truth comes first. The family name is what you used whenever you needed me to stay quiet. Nobody moved. Nobody laughed. And this time, Mom could not say I was joking. The buyers did not argue with me. They closed their folders, asked for copies of my statement, and suspended the deal before lunch. There was no dramatic arrest, no shouting in the parking lot, no handcuffs, no cameras, no instant punishment, just a stopped transaction. And somehow, that was worse for Dad. For the first time in his life, the Parker name could not push past a problem. Lawyers would not be charmed by it. Accountants would not soften numbers for it. The records had to be reviewed. The ownership had to be corrected, and every claim built on my silence had to be examined. The original $20 million deal died within a week. 3 months later, a smaller offer came back. This one was honest. I kept ownership of the design and granted the company a limited license to keep manufacturing it. The new agreement recognized me as the creator, paid me a fair licensing fee, and required independent review of future ownership records. I added one condition Dad hated. No employee could be punished for cooperating with the review. Tom kept his job. So did most of the production team. The company survived, but it shrank to the size of what it had actually earned. Dad lost control over legal and intellectual property decisions. He still had an office, but every document now required outside review. He never apologized. Instead, he told relatives I had humiliated him over paperwork and cost the family millions because I wanted attention. For a while, hearing that still hurt. Then I realized something. A man who needs a lie to remain the hero will always call the truth an attack. Mom stayed with him. She called me once a week at first, speaking carefully about weather, recipes, and neighbors. She avoided the company. She avoided Christmas. She avoided the words I needed. One afternoon, she said, family should come first. I looked through my kitchen window at the Chicago snow. Not before the truth, I said. Then I ended the call. It was not cruel. It was a boundary. Emily surprised me. She never gave me a real apology. But months later, she called and asked if I could explain acoustic design to Lily for a school project. I waited for the joke. It never came. So I showed Lily how sound moves through a room. She pressed her hand against a small panel and asked why inventors put their names on things. Because making something matters. I told her. And because nobody should erase the person who made it. Emily heard me. She said nothing, but she did not interrupt. Michael met me at home the night the new agreement was signed. He had not made one call, pressured one buyer, or rescued me from anything. He poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs and asked, "How do you feel lighter?" I said, "and sadder." He nodded like both answers were allowed. That was love, not control, not leverage, not a debt. The first prototype came back to me as part of the licensing agreement. I hung it in my studio backward. The polished front faced the wall. The rough wooden frame faced the room. SP was still carved inside it. Clients sometimes ask why I display it that way. I tell them the hidden side was the part holding everything together. Then I think about the girl I used to be, the one who believed disappearing was kindness, the one who confused silence with peace. I do not hate her. She survived the only way she knew how. Sometimes justice does not look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like a corrected record, an open door, and your own name restored at last. But I will not teach Lily to survive that way, because ending a family pattern is not about winning one perfect battle. It is about making sure the next girl learns sooner that love should never require her to vanish. If your family only loves you when you stay quiet, carry the burden, or give up what is yours. That is not peace. It is control wearing a familiar face. Forgiveness does not mean handing someone the pen they used to erase you. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to protect your work, your voice, and your future. You are allowed to love your family without disappearing inside it. If this story felt familiar, share your experience in the comments, send this video to someone who needs it, and subscribe so you do not miss the next story.